For millennia, humanity has built wonders, conquering landscapes, defying nature. From the sprawling cities of Mesopotamia, whose fertile crescent fed millions, to the hidden temples of the Maya, shrouded in verdant jungles, civilizations rose, flourished, and one by one, crumbled into dust. But what if the forces that brought these mighty empires to their knees weren't just invaders or internal strife? What if an even more primal, relentless enemy, the climate itself, played a devastating, often silent role? Today, as our planet faces unprecedented environmental challenges, rising temperatures, vanishing water supplies, extreme weather events, and burgeoning climate migration, the echoes of the past grow louder. Are we, in our modern hubris and technological might, repeating the mistakes of those who came before? In this groundbreaking journey, Dust to Despair, Ancient Cities and Today's Climate Crisis Unveiled, we will embark on an extraordinary exploration across continents and through time. We will unearth the archaeological, geological, and climatological evidence that reveals how ancient societies, from the sun-baked plains of the Near East to the once lush forests of Mesoamerica, contended with dramatic, often catastrophic shifts in their environment. We'll witness the ingenuity, the resilience, and, ultimately, the profound vulnerabilities of people pushed to their limits by ecological collapse. By juxtaposing these historical warnings with the accelerating climate crisis of our own time, we confront a chilling question. Is history not just rhyming, but directly repeating itself on a global scale? The answers lie buried beneath the sands of time, in the desiccated landscapes of forgotten cities, and within the urgent scientific data of our present moment. Understanding these ancient lessons isn't merely an academic exercise. It's a vital key to securing our future. Join us as we unveil the profound connections between the dust of antiquity and the despair threatening our world today. From the parched earth of forgotten deserts, where dust devils dance over ancient ruins, a chilling question echoes through time. What if the forces that brought down mighty civilizations centuries ago are re-emerging today? We stand at a precipice, looking back at the ghosts of grandeur, not destroyed by invading armies, but swallowed by the very land that sustained them. This is not a tale of conquest, but of profound fragility, a testament to the fact that even the most advanced, ingenious societies can crumble when pitted against the relentless, unforgiving power of a changing climate. Imagine vibrant metropolises bustling with life, innovation, and ambition. Then picture them slowly, inexorably, fading into the sand, their complex systems undone by a single, insidious force: environmental collapse. Our journey begins by exploring this stark reality, the concept of entire cities, once epicenters of human achievement, that simply vanished, not in a sudden, catastrophic cataclysm, but through a slow, agonizing process, often driven by the insidious creep of drought. Before the industrial age, before the combustion engine, entire populations were at the mercy of the elements. Their fate, inextricably linked to the rhythm of rivers, the abundance of rain, and the fertility of the soil. When these natural systems fractured, civilizations followed. This isn't just history. It's a profound warning, etched into the very stones of these lost worlds. A warning that speaks of a delicate balance, easily disrupted and devastatingly difficult to restore. It asks us to confront the uncomfortable truth. If they, with all their ingenuity and resilience, could not withstand the sustained ecological stress, what lessons must we, in our modern world, urgently heed? Their silence is deafening, a prelude to the storm we now face. Our first major case study takes us to the crucible of civilization itself. Mesopotamia, nestled between the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers, this fertile crescent, often called the cradle of civilization, witnessed humanity's first monumental leaps. Here in what is now modern-day Iraq, Sumerians and Akkadians forged the world's earliest cities. Uruk, Akkad, inventing writing, the wheel, complex irrigation, and organized statecraft. It was a land of incredible abundance, where the annual flooding of the rivers deposited rich, life-giving silt, transforming barren plains into bountiful agricultural land. This was a technological marvel for its time, a testament to human ingenuity in harnessing nature for prosperity. But even in this land of plenty, where rivers flowed and canals crisscrossed the landscape, an inherent vulnerability lurked. The very system that brought life also carried the seeds of destruction. The flat, low-lying plains, while ideal for irrigation, were also subject to intense evaporation under the relentless Mesopotamian sun. The rivers, while generous, were not always predictable, prone to devastating floods or periods of reduced flow. The early farmers, in their quest for ever greater yields, were unknowingly embarking on a path that would, over centuries, transform their verdant fields into saline wastelands. From approximately 400 to 2000 BCE, this region was a dynamic tapestry of competing city-states and burgeoning empires. The Sumerians laid the foundation. Then came the Akkadians, building an empire that stretched across the region, a testament to unprecedented political and military power. They mastered their environment, or so they thought. But the unseen forces of nature, amplified by human practices, were slowly, subtly, preparing to reclaim what was once theirs. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation between human ambition and environmental reality. The Akkadian Empire, under the legendary Sargon the Great, was a titan of its age. Emerging around 2334 BCE, it was arguably the first true empire in history, a vast administrative and military machine that unified a diverse array of city-states under a single rule. Sargon's successors, like Naram-Sin, further expanded its reach, erecting monumental structures and commanding armies across vast territories. Their power seemed absolute, their control over the land unwavering. Yet in a blink of geological time, around 2200 BCE, catastrophic event struck. The mighty Akkadian Empire, which had stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, simply disintegrated. Its cities were abandoned, its administrative system dissolved, and its people dispersed. For centuries, the cause remained shrouded in mystery. Modern scientific inquiry, however, has begun to unravel this ancient enigma. Scientists, acting as historical detectives, have painstakingly pieced together clues from the Earth itself. By analyzing sediment cores from the Gulf of Oman, stalagmites from caves in Iran, and even dust deposits in Greenland ice cores, they've uncovered compelling evidence of a sudden, severe, and prolonged climate shift. Around 4,200 years ago, precisely when the Akkadian Empire faltered, a devastating megadrought gripped the region. This wasn't just a bad season. It was decades, perhaps even a century, of drastically reduced rainfall, accompanied by fierce dust storms that choked the air and buried fertile lands. This 4.2-kilo-year event was a global phenomenon, impacting regions far beyond Mesopotamia. But for the Akkadians, it was a death knell. Rivers dwindled, crops failed en masse, and famine spread like wildfire. The sophisticated irrigation systems, once their lifeline, now ran dry, becoming monuments to a vanished prosperity. The political and social stability, built on agricultural surplus, fractured under the immense pressure of starvation and resource scarcity. The empire, for all its might, could not fight the sky. Its collapse serves as a stark, empirical warning. Even the strongest human constructs are vulnerable to the raw power of a changing climate. While the 4.2 megadrought delivered the final, crushing blow, the Akkadian collapse wasn't solely a victim of nature's wrath. It was also a slow, self-inflicted wound, a tragic consequence of unsustainable agricultural practices. For millennia, the farmers of Mesopotamia had relied on irrigation to transform arid lands into fertile fields. But in a hot, arid climate, this continuous irrigation had a devastating, insidious side effect: salinization. Here's how it works. River water, though fresh, contains tiny amounts of dissolved salts. When this water is used to irrigate fields, a significant portion evaporates from the surface, leaving these salts behind. Over time, as more water is applied and evaporates, these salts accumulate in the topsoil. Without sufficient rainfall to flush them away, and with poor drainage in the flat Mesopotamian plains, the water table rises, bringing even more salt from deeper soil layers to the surface through capillary action. The once fertile soil slowly but surely becomes toxic to most crops, turning vibrant green fields into barren, white-crusted wastelands. Archaeological and textual evidence reveals a grim progression. Sumerian records from as early as 2500 BCE lament declining crop yields, especially of salt-sensitive wheat, which was gradually replaced by more salt-tolerant barley. By the time of the Akkadian Empire, centuries of continuous, intensive irrigation had pushed much of the prime agricultural land past its breaking point. When the megadrought hit, reducing the flow of fresh water and accelerating evaporation, the salinization crisis escalated rapidly. The land, already weakened, could offer no buffer against the climate shock. This silent killer, a slow-motion environmental degradation driven by the very methods intended to ensure prosperity, exacerbated the drought, starving the empire from within. It's a chilling reminder that even the most innovative solutions, when not understood in their full ecological context, can become instruments of decline. As the Mesopotamian world grappled with its environmental reckoning, thousands of kilometers to the east, another magnificent civilization flourished along a different, equally vital river system. The Indus Valley Civilization, spanning from around 2500 to 1900 BCE, was one of the three early Old World civilizations, alongside Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. It was a civilization defined by its enigma. No grand palaces, no monuments to kings or pharaohs have been found, and its sophisticated writing system remains undeciphered. Yet its sheer scale, urban planning, and technological prowess were breathtaking. Imagine cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, meticulously planned on grid systems, featuring advanced drainage, complex sanitation, and public baths centuries before the Romans. Their populations numbered in the tens of thousands, sustained by vast agricultural hinterlands. Their craftsmanship in pottery, metallurgy, and seal carving was exquisite. But unlike Mesopotamia, which was sustained by two major rivers, the Indus people relied on a much more complex and perhaps more vulnerable hydrological system. The Indus River itself, and crucially, the Ghaggar-Hakra River system. The Ghaggar-Hakra, now largely a dry, seasonal stream, was once a mighty river, perhaps even more significant than the Indus for the heartland of the civilization. Fed by glacial meltwaters and monsoon rains, it provided the lifeblood for countless settlements and vast agricultural zones. Its consistent flow enabled the flourishing of a complex urban society across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. The Indus people built their cities, their livelihoods, and their entire way of life around the predictable generosity of this river system. They were a people intricately connected to their water source, a connection that would ultimately determine their fate. Their cities were testaments to adaptation and harmony with their environment, but even this harmony proved fragile. The grandeur of the Indus Valley Civilization, its meticulously planned cities and advanced infrastructure, stood as a testament to human ingenuity. But like their Mesopotamian predecessors, their destiny was inextricably tied to the unpredictable whim of climate and geology. For centuries, the Ghaggar-Hakra River system had been the lifeblood of much of the Indus heartland, a powerful network fed by the towering Himalayan glaciers and the crucial monsoon rains. Its consistent flow was the bedrock upon which the civilization was built. Then, around 1900 BCE, this mighty river began to falter and ultimately largely disappeared. What happened to the Ghaggar-Hakra? Scientific consensus points to a combination of geological and climatic shifts. Seismic activity, specifically tectonic plate movements in the Himalayas, is believed to have played a significant role. These powerful geological forces gradually, but decisively rerouted the headwaters of the Gagar-Hakra. Major tributaries that once fed it, like the Sutlej and the Yamuna, shifted course, diverting their glacial meltwaters eastward into the Indus River system or west into the Ganges. Simultaneously, paleoclimate data from sediment cores and ancient lakebeds reveals a prolonged period of weakening monsoon rains across the region, a severe drying trend that mirrored the 4.2 Ka event that crippled Akkad. The combination was catastrophic. With its primary glacial feeders redirected and its monsoon-fed seasonal flows drastically reduced, the Gagar-Hakra transformed from a perennial, powerful river into a collection of ephemeral, rain-fed streams. The once fertile plains along its banks, supporting vast populations, began to dry out. The cities and agricultural systems that had thrived on its abundance found their lifelines severed. This wasn't a sudden flood or an earthquake. It was a slow, agonizing death of a river, a hydrological collapse that forced an entire civilization to reconsider its existence. The Gagar-Hakra's retreat stands as a haunting symbol of how intimately human prosperity is linked to the stability of natural systems, and how devastatingly irreversible their changes can be. As the lifeblood Gagar-Hakra river system dwindled and eventually disappeared, the sophisticated urban centers of the Indus Valley civilization faced an existential crisis. Their massive populations, once sustained by abundant riverine agriculture, could no longer be supported. This wasn't a sudden, violent end, but a drawn-out, agonizing decline marked by desperate attempts at adaptation. Archaeological evidence reveals a profound demographic shift. People began to abandon the great cities of the Gagar-Hakra plains, migrating eastward towards the Ganges basin, where monsoon rains were still more reliable, or southeast into Gujarat. New, smaller settlements emerged, often less planned and lacking the grand infrastructure of their predecessors. The intricate urban planning, monumental architecture, and standardized weights and measures that defined the mature Harappan period slowly vanished. Craft production declined, trade networks fractured, and the unique Indus script disappeared from common use, becoming a lost language. In the face of dwindling water resources, agricultural practices also changed. There was a shift away from the large-scale, river-fed cultivation of wheat and barley towards more drought-resistant crops like millet and rice, which could be grown with rain-fed irrigation. These adaptations, while allowing for continued survival, came at steep cost. The resources required to sustain complex urban centers, with their specialized labor, intricate administration, and extensive trade, simply weren't available in the new, fragmented landscape. The populations became more dispersed, more rural, and their social structures less hierarchical. The vibrant, centralized civilization decentralized, devolved into regional cultures, and ultimately, its unique identity faded. The story of the Indus Valley civilization's decline is a stark reminder that adaptation, while crucial, can only go so far. When the fundamental environmental parameters shift too dramatically, even the most resilient societies can be reduced to fragments, their once unassailable systems overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the change. It shows us that complex societies, dependent on specialized roles and large-scale infrastructure, are particularly vulnerable when their environmental foundations erode. Our journey now takes us across oceans and continents, from the arid plains of the Near East and South Asia to the lush, verdant rainforests of Mesoamerica. Here, for millennia, a civilization of unparalleled artistic and intellectual achievement thrived, the Maya. Known for their intricate calendar, their sophisticated understanding of astronomy, a complex hieroglyphic writing system, and the construction of awe-inspiring pyramids and temple cities, the Maya carved out an enduring legacy in a landscape far different from the riverine valleys we've explored thus far. From around 250 CE to 900 CE, during their classic period, the Maya built magnificent urban centers like Tikal, Palenque, Copan, and Chichen Itza. These cities, often located in the lowlands of what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras, were not built along great rivers in the same way as Mesopotamia or the industry. Instead, the Maya mastered a challenging rainforest environment, developing ingenious water management systems, including reservoirs and elaborate canal networks, to capture and store precious rainwater, particularly during the region's pronounced dry seasons. Their society was hierarchical, with powerful kings, priests, and a vast peasant class supporting the elite. They engaged in elaborate rituals, fierce warfare, and extensive trade. Their stones steely recount epic tales of dynastic power and cosmic events. Yet, even this mighty civilization, so brilliantly adapted to its unique ecological niche, would eventually face its own profound environmental pressures. The very systems that allowed them to flourish in the challenging rainforest environment would, in time, become vulnerabilities. As we delve deeper, we will uncover how cycles of drought, deforestation, and changing rainfall patterns contributed to the mysterious collapse of the classic Maya, leaving behind magnificent ruins swallowed by the jungle. Another powerful echo of humanity's enduring struggle with the planet's shifting climate. Our journey into the past begins deep within the emerald embrace of the Yucatan Peninsula, a land where the mighty classic Maya civilization once sculpted cities of staggering beauty and intellectual prowess. Yet, this cradle of innovation would become a crucible, tested by forces beyond their immediate control. The vibrant heartbeat of their cities, pulsing with life, trade, and ceremony, began to falter not with a sudden cataclysm, but with a slow, relentless tightening of nature's grip. A series of profound and prolonged droughts that repeatedly scourged the region between the 8th and 10th centuries. These weren't isolated dry spells. They were sustained blows, one after another, chipping away at the foundations of a complex society. Paleoclimatic data, painstakingly extracted from lakebed sediments and stalagmites in caves like the famous Motzl Chasm and the Yakbalam Cave, paint a chillingly precise picture. Scientists analyze ancient layers, reading the isotopic signatures within mineral deposits and pollen grains like pages of a forgotten chronicle. They reveal not just dryness, but extreme dryness, periods where rainfall plummeted by as much as 70% in certain seasons. Imagine the lifeblood of an agricultural society, dependent on consistent rain for its maize and bean harvests, slowly evaporating. Reservoirs, painstakingly engineered to capture precious water, dwindled to muddy puddles. The intricate hydrological systems that fed vast populations began to fail. This wasn't a sudden, apocalyptic event, but a slow-motion catastrophe, an insidious creeping dryness that stretched over decades, forcing generations to contend with an increasingly hostile environment. Each successive drought cycle wasn't just a challenge. It was an escalating existential threat, pushing a vibrant civilization closer to the brink, setting the stage for the dramatic societal unraveling that would soon follow. The lush canopy of the rainforest, usually a source of life, slowly began to whisper tales of thirst and despair. While the cruel hand of natural climate change delivered devastating blows, the Maya themselves, unknowingly, amplified their own vulnerability. It's a sobering realization that even the most advanced societies can contribute to their downfall through their own environmental footprint. The classic Maya, with their burgeoning populations and monumental architectural ambitions, demanded vast resources. Their cities, with their towering pyramids, sprawling plazas, and intricate residential compounds, required immense quantities of timber for construction and lime plaster production, which involved burning vast amounts of wood. To feed millions, rainforests were systematically cleared, hectare by hectare, transforming verdant jungle into expansive maize fields. This relentless deforestation had cascading and catastrophic effects. Without the deep root systems of the rainforest trees to bind the soil, the land became susceptible to erosion, particularly during the intense, albeit infrequent, tropical downpours that punctuated the dry periods. Precious topsoil, vital for agriculture, was washed away, silting up rivers and reservoirs. The denuded landscape also altered local climate patterns, reducing evapotranspiration, the process by which plants release water vapor into the atmosphere, potentially leading to even less localized rainfall and exacerbating the very droughts that plagued them. The once self-sustaining ecosystem began to unravel, stripped bare by human endeavor. What was initially a testament to their ingenuity, clearing land to sustain life, became an unwitting act of self-sabotage, accelerating the desertification of their precious lands. The Maya weren't just victims of climate. They were, in part, unwitting architects of their own environmental catastrophe, a stark warning echoing through the millennia about the delicate balance between human progress and ecological resilience. As the droughts deepened and the land yielded less, the subtle hum of daily life in Maya cities transformed into a chorus of growing desperation. The mounting environmental pressure wasn't just an agricultural problem. It became a societal one, an existential threat that attacked the very fabric of their sophisticated civilization. Food and water, once reliable, became scarce, then precious, then tragically unobtainable for many. Imagine the burden on ordinary families. Children going hungry, the elderly suffering, and the promise of a bountiful harvest replaced by the specter of starvation. This scarcity ignited a powder keg of societal stress. Leaders, once revered as divine intermediaries, struggled to deliver the prosperity their people expected. Confidence in the ruling elite and the intricate religious systems began to erode. Archaeological evidence, in the form of increased fortifications around cities, skeletal remains showing signs of trauma, and hieroglyphic inscriptions detailing conflicts, tells a grim story. Warfare, once ritualized and focused on prestige and captive-taking, transformed into a brutal struggle for survival, a desperate scramble for diminishing resources, control over the last fertile lands, the remaining reliable water sources. Competing city-states, once intertwined by trade and political alliances, turned on each other with increased ferocity. Populations migrated, abandoning long-held settlements in search of sustenance, only to find similar struggles elsewhere. The once unified cultural landscape fragmented into isolated pockets of resistance and despair. The grand architecture of cities like Dos Pilas and Aguatica, once symbols of power, became fortified strongholds, grim testaments to a society tearing itself apart under the immense weight of environmental collapse. The proud Maya, masters of astronomy and art, found their world consumed by the most basic struggle, survival. Their glorious era was not ended by invasion, but by an internal implosion, triggered by an environment pushed past its breaking point. From the lush, now struggling, jungles of the Yucatan, our journey takes us thousands of miles northwest to a dramatically different landscape, the arid, unforgiving deserts of the American Southwest. Here, nestled within a stark canyon in present-day New Mexico, another remarkable civilization defied the constraints of their environment. These were the ancestral Puebloans, and their crowning achievement was Chaco Canyon, a place that between roughly 850 and 1150 CE blossomed into an extraordinary hub of culture, ceremony, and commerce. This wasn't merely a collection of villages. It was a desert metropolis, a marvel of ancient urban planning and engineering. Rising from the canyon floor and etched into its towering cliffs were colossal multi-story structures known as great houses. Complexes like Pueblo Bonito, Chetroquetl, and Hungopavi. These weren't mere dwellings. They were intricate architectural masterpieces, built with precisely cut sandstone blocks, some containing hundreds of rooms, kivas for spiritual ceremonies, and elaborate astronomical alignments. But Chaco's influence extended far beyond the canyon itself. A vast network of meticulously engineered roads, some stretching for hundreds of miles across the desert, connected Chaco to more than 150 outlying communities, creating a sophisticated sphere of interaction and exchange. This entire intricate system, however, rested upon a precarious foundation, the availability of scarce water. The ancestral Puebloans mastered techniques to capture and conserve every precious drop, building dams, canals, and terrace fields. Yet, even their profound ingenuity could not fundamentally alter the climate of this high desert plateau, where life was always a delicate negotiation with the elements. Their achievements, while awe-inspiring, were built on the very edge of environmental sustainability, making them exquisitely vulnerable to even minor climatic shifts. Their story, while unique in its cultural expression, begins to echo the familiar refrains of dependency on nature's fickle temperament. The vibrant era of Chaco Canyon, a testament to human resilience and cooperation in an arid land, reached its zenith around 1150 CE. But like the classic Maya before them, the ancestral Puebloans found their impressive accomplishments overshadowed by an overwhelming environmental challenge. What followed their golden age was a period of increasing aridity, culminating in a catastrophic and prolonged climatic event now known as the Great Drought of the Southwest. Beginning in the late 13th century, around 1276 CE, and lasting for more than 2 decades, this drought was not merely a dry spell. It was an unrelenting assault on a society already delicately balanced on the knife edge of survival. Tree-ring data, meticulously compiled from ancient timbers preserved in ruins and living trees, provides an astonishingly precise record of this devastating period. The narrow, tightly packed growth rings speak volumes of years where rainfall was virtually non-existent, where rivers dwindled to trickles and springs, once reliable, simply ceased to flow. The once ingenious water management systems of Chaco, designed for intermittent dry periods, were utterly overwhelmed. Crop yields plummeted, leading to widespread famine. The intricate network of exchange and tribute that bound the canyon to its outlying communities began to fracture under the strain. Imagine the despair as generation after generation faced the same parched earth, the same empty skies, the same gnawing hunger. The very lifeblood of their culture, their ceremonies, their communal efforts, their belief systems, would have been profoundly challenged by a world that refused to yield. The Great Drought was the ultimate stress test, pushing the ancestral Puebloan society past its breaking point, revealing the absolute limits of even the most sophisticated adaptations to a fundamentally changing climate. The very spirit of Chaco Canyon began to dry up, mirroring the landscape around it. The relentless Great Drought left the ancestral Puebloans with an impossible choice: stay and perish, or leave behind everything they had built. The magnificent great houses of Chaco Canyon, once vibrant centers of life, ceremony, and trade, became silent witnesses to a forced exodus. As water sources failed and food supplies dwindled to nothing, the intricate social and economic ties that bound the Chacoan world together unraveled completely. The once bustling plazas grew quiet, the kivas no longer resonated with chants, and the carefully constructed walls stood empty, echoing only the whisper of the wind. Starting around the mid-12th century, with significant acceleration during the Great Drought of the late 13th century, populations began to migrate away from Chaco Canyon and its associated outlier communities. This wasn't a planned relocation. It was a desperate, piecemeal dispersal, a series of painful departures. Families packed what meager possessions they could carry: a few tools, a precious grinding stone, a handful of seeds, and set out across the unforgiving landscape. They moved in search of water, arable land, and perhaps a new beginning in areas like the Mesa Verde region, the Rio Grande Valley, or the Cantor region, where conditions, while still challenging, offered a glimmer of hope. But these migrations were fraught with danger. The journey itself was perilous, and arriving in new territories often meant conflict with existing communities already struggling with their own resource limitations. The great houses, symbols of their advanced civilization, were not destroyed. They were simply abandoned, left to the slow reclamation of the desert. The story of Chaco Canyon is not one of a sudden disappearance, but of a gradual, agonizing retreat, a people forced to abandon their heritage, Their architectural masterpieces and their ancestral lands in the face of an insurmountable environmental crisis. Their magnificent achievements became poignant monuments to a world that could no longer sustain them. The haunting emptiness of Chaco Canyon, its monumental structures, now standing as silent sentinels, offers a profoundly powerful cautionary tale. It is a story not just of a climate crisis, but of the very limits of human ingenuity and societal complexity when confronted with extreme and persistent environmental change. The ancestral Puebloans were not primitive. They were masters of their environment, meticulously planning their settlements, developing sophisticated agricultural techniques, and engineering impressive water management systems. They built a society of remarkable scale and influence, a beacon of culture in a harsh desert. Yet, even with their deep ecological knowledge and their impressive adaptations, they ultimately faced a force too great to overcome. The Great Drought pushed their meticulously balanced system beyond its capacity, revealing the fundamental truth that even the most advanced human societies are inextricably linked to and utterly dependent on the health and stability of their ecological support systems. Chaco's demise underscores the delicate equilibrium that must exist between a civilization's demands and the finite resources of its environment. It teaches us that growth, no matter how magnificent, can be unsustainable if it outstrips the land's capacity to regenerate. Their legacy is not just the stone ruins that at the southwest, but a potent, timeless warning. Ignore the signs of environmental stress at your peril. The ancestral Puebloans were forced to make impossible choices, to abandon a home built over centuries, leaving behind a stark reminder that even the grandest human endeavors can be brought to their knees by a changing climate. Their disappearing act serves as a mirror, reflecting our own vulnerabilities and demanding that we heed the echoes of their struggle. As we journey through these vanished worlds, from the enigmatic collapse of the classic Maya in the verdant Yucatan to the forced exodus from Chaco Canyon's stark desert, striking patterns begin to emerge. These are not isolated tragedies, but variations on a recurring theme, an anatomy of collapse that transcends geography, culture, and millennia. The specific details may differ: rainforest versus high desert, intricate glyphs versus meticulously laid stone, but the underlying environmental and societal factors that led to their downfall share common, chilling threads. First, there is the undeniable role of climate change. Prolonged, severe droughts acting as primary catalysts, disrupting the very foundation of life. For the Maya, it was a series of dry spells that crippled their agricultural heartland. For Chaco, it was the Great Drought that pushed a delicate system past its breaking point. Second, we see the profound impact of human environmental footprint, practices that, while initially enabling growth, ultimately exacerbated vulnerability. Deforestation and intensive agriculture for the Maya, straining limited water resources for the ancestral Puebloans. Both illustrate how human actions, intended for survival and prosperity, can inadvertently accelerate ecological degradation. Third, the consequence of these environmental pressures, societal stress, resource scarcity, and intensified conflict. As food and water became scarce, internal tensions flared, trust eroded, and warfare became a desperate struggle for survival, fracturing once cohesive societies. Finally, the ultimate outcome, the abandonment of major centers and the widespread dispersal of populations, a stark testament to the limits of human resilience when confronted with an environment that can no longer sustain them. These are not mere historical footnotes. They're urgent warnings echoing across time, reminding us that the planet's capacity is finite and our actions have consequences. The story of Dust to Despair is a symphony of these recurring patterns, playing out in different eras, but always leading to the same haunting crescendo, the disappearance of once great civilizations. Now, the chilling question remains: are we, in our modern world, listening to the echoes of their fate? For millennia, the story of human civilization has been inextricably linked to the story of water. From the verdant floodplains of Mesopotamia to the lush valleys cradling the Mayan heartland. Great societies rose where life-giving rivers flowed, where seasonal rains blessed the earth, and where ingenious minds mastered irrigation. Water was not merely a resource. It was the sacred breath of existence, the very pulse of agriculture, sanitation, and the sprawling networks that sustained millions. We speak of empires built on trade, on military might, on philosophical foundations. But beneath it all, underpinning every facet of their being, was the consistent, reliable flow of water. Yet, this seemingly eternal gift was often a mirage of stability. The mighty Nile, giver of life to ancient Egypt, was subject to devastatingly unpredictable floods and droughts. The Indus River, arterial lifeline of a vast civilization, could shift its course, leaving once thriving cities stranded and parched. The elaborate aqueducts of Rome, symbols of engineering prowess, carried water from distant mountains, a testament to the ever-present challenge of supply. When the rains failed, when the rivers dwindled, or when the ground beneath them refused to yield its precious bounty, the most sophisticated systems began to falter. The delicate balance was easily upset, often by forces beyond human control. Prolonged periods of aridity, sometimes lasting decades, sometimes centuries, slowly but inexorably turned fertile fields into dust, vibrant wetlands into cracked earth, and bustling settlements into ghost towns. The ancient world was acutely aware of this fragility, building their spiritual beliefs and practical technologies around appeasing the water gods and managing every precious drop. But even their most fervent prayers and most advanced engineering could not always withstand the relentless onslaught of a changing climate. It was this fundamental disruption, this sudden withdrawal of life's most basic necessity, that often initiated the long, agonizing cascade towards oblivion. The loss of water wasn't merely an inconvenience. It was the severing of the very umbilical cord that connected humanity to the earth, the first tremor in a series of catastrophic societal quakes. When the waters receded, a far more insidious and immediate terror took hold: famine. Water scarcity didn't just inconvenience, it killed. The meticulous calendars of ancient farmers, tuned to the rhythms of rain and flood, were thrown into disarray. Fields that once promised bounty became barren tracts of dust. The careful stores of grain, the very backbone of survival, rapidly dwindled. We are not speaking of mere lean seasons, but of prolonged, multi-year droughts that annihilated harvests across vast regions, year after agonizing year. The consequences were devastatingly predictable, yet utterly overwhelming. Imagine the Sumerian plains in the late 3rd millennium BCE, the once fertile crescent of Mesopotamia, drying up. As the Tigris and Euphrates became unreliable, the intricate irrigation systems, once the envy of the ancient world, were choked by salt and silt, their purpose rendered moot. Historical records from the Akkadian Empire speak of lands returning to uncultivated wasteland, and widespread hunger becoming so severe that people ate grass and water was sold by price. This wasn't just a challenge, it was a societal death sentence. Similarly, in the southern lowlands of the Maya civilization, evidence from lakebed sediment cores and paleoclimate data reveals a series of severe droughts between 800 and 1000 CE, coinciding precisely with their dramatic decline. Maize, their sacred staple, failed catastrophically. The intricate networks of trade and tribute, designed to redistribute food, buckled under the impossible strain. With nothing to give and nowhere to turn, the very fabric of daily life began to unravel. Children were the first to perish, their small bodies succumbing to starvation and disease. Adults, weakened by hunger, became vulnerable to every ailment. The strong might try to hoard, the weak would beg. Social hierarchies, once rigid, fractured under the primal urge to survive. Panic, desperation, and despair replaced order. The ability of any government or religious authority to maintain control diminished rapidly when its people faced imminent death. Famine wasn't just an outcome, It was the direct, brutal blow that hollowed out communities from within, stripping away dignity, hope, and, ultimately, life itself. When the land could no longer provide, when the wells ran dry and the fields lay fallow, there was only one desperate choice left for those who still possessed the strength to move. The collapse of food systems, ignited by water scarcity, forced ancient populations into wrenching mass migrations. Entire communities, sometimes entire peoples, abandoned ancestral lands that had sustained them for centuries, embarking on perilous journeys into the unknown. This was not a choice made lightly, but a stark matter of survival. Their homes, their temples, their very identities were tied to the soil, yet the soil had betrayed them. Imagine the late Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE, a period of widespread upheaval across the Mediterranean and Near East. As successive droughts gripped vast regions, including the Hittite Empire in Anatolia and the Mycenaean kingdoms in Greece, archaeological evidence suggests waves of displacement. Texts from Egypt speak of the Sea Peoples, enigmatic groups who ravaged coastal cities, believed by many historians to be desperate refugees and raiders, driven from their drying homelands. Their movements caused a domino effect, destabilizing an already fractured world. Far from being isolated incidents, these were often vast, slow-motion humanitarian crises, stretching over years, even decades. Families packed what meager possessions they could carry: a few tools, a precious water skin, perhaps a handful of seeds. They walked across scorched plains, navigated through hostile territories, always seeking the promise of water, the hope of fertile land. The human cost was immense. Countless lives were lost to starvation, disease, and the inevitable conflicts that arose when desperate groups encountered one another. Those who survived often arrived in new lands as strangers, sometimes welcomed, more often viewed with suspicion or hostility by established communities already struggling with their own resources. The influx of hungry, displaced people put immense pressure on existing settlements, straining their food supplies, their social structures, and their political stability. The ancient world offers a stark lesson. Environmental collapse doesn't just empty lands. It displaces people, creating ripple effects that can shatter entire civilizations, profoundly reshaping the demographic and political landscape for generations. As resources dwindled and populations moved, the fragile veneer of social order often cracked, giving way to widespread unrest and violent conflict. Water, fertile land, and stored food became increasingly precious commodities, igniting fierce competition both within and between communities. When survival itself is at stake, the rules of society rapidly unravel. Consider the city-states of ancient Mesopotamia, constantly vying for control over water rights and fertile riverbanks. During periods of drought, these localized skirmishes escalated into full-blown wars, further depleting resources and destabilizing already stressed populations. In the later periods of the Roman Republic, agrarian crises, often exacerbated by environmental shifts, fueled immense social tensions. Landless peasants, displaced by larger estates and unable to grow their own food, flocked to Rome, creating a volatile urban underclass ripe for political manipulation and riot. Bread riots were a common occurrence, a desperate cry for sustenance that often ended in bloodshed. These were not merely political disputes. They were visceral battles for existence. The late Bronze Age collapse, which saw the widespread migrations of desperate peoples, also witnessed an explosion of piracy, raiding, and outright warfare. As central authorities weakened, a theme we'll explore shortly, local lords and tribal leaders were left to fend for themselves, often resorting to aggression to secure what little remained. Fortifications grew more elaborate, settlements became more isolated, and the constant threat of attack became a grim reality. It wasn't just organized armies clashing. It was neighbor against neighbor, village against village, desperate groups clashing over a single well or a patch of arable land. Ecological stress acted as a potent accelerant, transforming latent rivalries into open warfare and pushing societies to the brink of self-destruction. The desperation born of scarcity bred suspicion, fear, and ultimately violence, turning entire regions into battlegrounds where the ultimate prize was simply survival. As water became scarce, fields withered, and the specter of famine loomed, the very legitimacy of ancient political and religious authorities began to erode. Leaders, once seen as divine intermediaries or protectors of the people, found themselves unable to provide the most fundamental necessities for survival. The social contract, often unspoken yet deeply understood, was shattered when the gods seemed to turn their backs, and the rulers could no longer ensure the life-giving rains or bountiful harvests. Consider the pharaohs of Egypt, whose very divinity was intertwined with the predictable flooding of the Nile. When a series of weak floods or severe droughts occurred, particularly during the first intermediate period, circa 2181 to 2055 BC, their authority was gravely undermined. People questioned their divine mandate, leading to widespread disorder, regional fragmentation, and a loss of centralized power. The mighty pharaoh, once capable of commanding vast resources, seemed helpless before the forces of nature, and his kingdom fractured. Similarly, Mayan kings, whose elaborate rituals and blood offerings were believed to appease the rain gods, lost their spiritual potency as persistent droughts gripped their lowlands. The grand ceremonies, the monumental architecture, the very symbols of their power, became hollow gestures when the rains continued to fail. Inscriptions detailing glorious victories gave way to silence, as rulers perhaps lost the trust and loyalty of their populace, or simply lost their lives in the ensuing chaos. When their divine connection proved futile against environmental calamity, their authority crumbled, paving the way for the abandonment of major cities and the ultimate collapse of their complex political system. In times of severe crisis, the inability to manage the profound impacts of drought, to feed the hungry, to protect against invaders, to maintain order, proved to be a fatal flaw for many ancient governing bodies. The erosion of trust, the loss of faith in leadership, and the inability to project power in the face of widespread suffering created a vacuum that destabilized entire empires and kingdoms. The very foundations of governance, built on perceived competence and divine favor, could not withstand the relentless assault of an unforgiving climate. But ancient societies were not merely passive victims of climate change. In a cruel twist of irony, many inadvertently exacerbated the very environmental stresses that plagued them, creating destructive feedback loops that amplified the impact of natural droughts. Their survival strategies, often designed for short-term gains, sometimes sowed the seeds of their own long-term destruction. This is where the human hand, however unknowingly, deepened the despair. Consider the widespread practice of deforestation. As populations grew, the demand for timber for building, fuel, and smelting metal soared. Hillsides, once covered in dense forests that acted as sponges, regulating water flow and preventing erosion, were systematically stripped bare. Without this natural cover, torrential rains, when they did arrive after dry spells, would wash away precious topsoil, silting up rivers and irrigation channels, and making the land even more prone to flash floods and subsequent desiccation. The once fertile slopes of ancient Greece and Rome, for instance, show extensive evidence of soil erosion directly linked to deforestation for agricultural expansion and resource extraction. Overgrazing by livestock, another common practice, turned delicate grasslands into barren dust bowls. Animals, desperate for forage in times of drought, would strip vegetation down to the roots, preventing regrowth and compacting the soil, making it less able to absorb water. The classic Maya, in their efforts to feed a burgeoning population, likely expanded their agricultural lands into less fertile areas, and their intensive farming practices may have led to significant soil erosion and depletion, further stressing an already parched landscape. Even sophisticated irrigation systems, like those in Mesopotamia, eventually contributed to the problem. Prolonged irrigation in arid zones, without proper drainage, led to the buildup of salt in the soil, a process known as salinization. Over centuries, once fertile fields became so saline that only salt-tolerant weeds could grow, rendering vast tracts of land permanently unproductive. So, while natural climate shifts initiated the crisis, human actions often amplified its devastating effects, creating a downward spiral from which recovery became increasingly difficult. These cascading crises, water scarcity leading to famine, igniting migration and conflict, eroding political authority, and amplified by human environmental degradation, eventually converged at a critical juncture, the tipping point. This is the threshold beyond which a complex system, whether an ecosystem or a civilization, can no longer recover from disturbance, even if conditions improve. For ancient societies, it was the point of no return, where the intricate web of interdependencies that defined their existence unraveled completely. In the southern Maya lowlands, after centuries of sophisticated urbanism and agricultural innovation, a series of intense droughts, compounded by widespread deforestation and soil erosion, pushed their system past this breaking point. By the 10th century CE, city after city was abandoned, their monumental stelae left unfinished, their populations dispersing into smaller, less complex settlements. It wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic event, but a slow, inexorable decline, where each successive challenge chipped away at the society's resilience until it could no longer absorb the shocks. Even if the rains eventually returned, the infrastructure was gone, the knowledge systems fractured, and the social memory of complex governance faded. The intricate systems that once allowed them to thrive could no longer be sustained or rebuilt. Similarly, the Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley, flourishing between 2500 and 1900 BCE, appears to have reached its tipping point as the monsoon patterns shifted eastward, leading to the drying up of vital rivers. While external invasions were once posited as the primary cause of its decline, modern archaeological and paleoclimatic evidence increasingly points to a prolonged drought. Their advanced urban planning, sanitation systems, and trade networks, once hallmarks of their power, could not withstand the fundamental challenge of a collapsing water supply. Rather than a violent end, it was a systemic failure, a gradual decentralization and deurbanization as people migrated towards more reliable water sources. The intricate social and economic fabric simply snapped. The concept of the tipping point is chilling because it suggests that there is a limit, a line beyond which even the most adaptable and resilient civilizations can fall into an irreversible decline, leaving behind only echoes in the dust. The echoes of these ancient collapses resonate with terrifying clarity in our modern world. Today, as global temperatures rise at an unprecedented rate, driven by human activity, we are witnessing the unfolding of a climate crisis that mirrors, on a planetary scale, the very mechanisms that brought down mighty civilizations centuries ago. The past, it seems, is not merely history, it is a prophecy. Just as ancient societies grappled with erratic rainfall and prolonged droughts, our world faces intensifying water scarcity. From the parched farmlands of California to the Horn of Africa, where millions teeter on the brink of famine, the foundational role of water is once again being violently reasserted. Reservoirs shrink, glaciers melt at alarming rates, and aquifers are depleted faster than they can recharge, threatening the food security of billions. The specter of widespread agricultural failure, once confined to regional empires, now looms over our interconnected global food system. The direct blow of famine, which ravaged the Akkadians and the Maya, is a present and growing threat to vulnerable populations across continents. And with scarcity comes displacement. The number of climate refugees is already growing, forcing millions from their homes due to rising sea levels, desertification, and extreme weather events. These desperate migrations are fueling social unrest and exacerbating conflicts over diminishing resources, creating political instability in fragile regions, a scenario chillingly familiar from the late Bronze Age collapse. Governments and international bodies struggle to cope, their authority and legitimacy challenged by a crisis that transcends national borders and traditional solutions. Furthermore, our own environmental practices, from rampant deforestation to intensive industrial agriculture, continue to create destructive feedback loops, amplifying the impacts of a warming world. We are, in many ways, accelerating our own vulnerability. The critical question is whether we, too, are approaching a global tipping point, a threshold beyond which our complex, interdependent systems might struggle to recover. The ancient world provides a stark, undeniable warning. The forces of climate are unforgiving. Understanding these historical warnings is not an academic exercise. It is an urgent, existential necessity for our shared future. Our journey through the echoes of ancient collapse brings us face to face with a terrifying contemporary reality, a world gripped by an accelerating thirst. Across continents, vast swathes of land, home to hundreds of millions, are teetering on the precipice of ecological and humanitarian disaster, mirroring the environmental stress that doomed civilizations millennia ago. From the sun-baked plains of the Sahel to the parched landscapes of the Horn of Africa, the very ground beneath people's feet is turning to dust. In Mali, Niger, and Chad, the Sahara encroaches relentlessly, swallowing fertile lands at an alarming rate, forcing pastoralists and farmers into increasingly desperate migrations. Lake Chad, once a colossal freshwater body, has shrunk by over 90% since the 1960s, a haunting symbol of regional desiccation. Millions depend on its dwindling waters, now a mere shadow of its former self, fueling instability and despair across four nations. Further east, the Horn of Africa, encompassing countries like Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya, has endured its worst drought in 4 decades. Successive rainy seasons have failed, turning vibrant ecosystems into barren wastelands. Livestock, the lifeblood of nomadic communities, perish in staggering numbers, their carcasses littering the desiccated earth like grim monuments to a dying way of life. Aid agencies report over 23 million people facing severe food insecurity, a crisis fueled directly by the climate's brutal unpredictability. Hospitals are overwhelmed by malnourished children, their tiny bodies testament to a catastrophe unfolding in slow motion. This isn't just about extreme weather. It's about a systemic, global shift pushing already vulnerable regions beyond their breaking point. Even in developed nations, the crisis bites deep. The American Southwest, a region famed for its sprawling cities and productive agriculture, faces a monumental challenge. The Colorado River Basin, a lifeline for 40 million people across 7 states and Mexico, is in an unprecedented state of decline. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the nation's largest reservoirs, have plummeted to historic lows, revealing sunken boats and ancient canyons once submerged beneath vast expanses of water. Scientists at the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation project further declines, forcing drastic water cuts and threatening the very foundation of regional prosperity. As the mighty Colorado dwindles, the question isn't if the taps will tighten further, but how dramatically. These aren't isolated incidents. They are interconnected arteries of a global system under immense strain. A stark warning that the same environmental forces that brought down ancient empires are now relentlessly testing the resilience of our modern world. The encroaching deserts and failing rainfalls are not confined to remote villages or struggling farmlands. In an unsettling echo of ancient urban centers that crumbled under environmental pressure, our largest and most advanced megacities, symbols of human ingenuity and progress, now stand precariously close to their own day zero scenarios. These sprawling metropolises, home to tens of millions, represent the pinnacle of modern civilization, yet they are shockingly vulnerable to the fundamental scarcity of water. Take Cape Town, South Africa. In 2018, the vibrant city, a jewel on the Atlantic coast, found itself staring down the barrel of running out of water entirely. Strict rationing desperate prayers for rain, and a global spotlight illuminated the chilling reality. A modern city, dependent on distant reservoirs, was just weeks away from its taps going dry. Only a combination of extreme conservation efforts and late, unexpected rains averted catastrophe, but the scar of day zero remains a potent warning. Across the globe, this vulnerability is not unique. Chennai, India, a metropolis of nearly 10 million, experienced its own day zero in 2019 when all four of its primary reservoirs ran dry. Images of citizens queuing for hours under a relentless sun, waiting for infrequent water tankers, shocked the world. Hotels shut down, businesses faltered, and daily life ground to a halt as the very essence of survival became a daily struggle. Mexico City, a historic urban titan built on ancient lake beds, grapples with a dual crisis: sinking infrastructure due to over-extraction of groundwater and an over-reliance on water pumped from hundreds of miles away, an energy-intensive and precarious lifeline. Each year, parts of the city literally sink by inches, further complicating its water future. Sao Paulo, Brazil, with its 22 million inhabitants, narrowly avoided a similar fate in 2015, when its main reservoir dropped to just 5% capacity, triggering widespread panic and social unrest. These are not isolated instances of bad luck. They are symptomatic of a global pattern: rapidly expanding urban populations outstripping sustainable water resources, compounded by climate change altering rainfall patterns and intensifying droughts. Our intricate networks of dams, pipelines, and pumping stations, once marvels of engineering, are now exposed as Achilles' heels. They extend deep into vulnerable ecosystems, draining rivers and aquifers to sustain urban growth, often at immense environmental cost. The convenience of a tap, once an unquestioned luxury, is now becoming a privilege, exposing the fragility of our urbanized existence. As ancient cities discovered, no amount of architectural grandeur or advanced planning can overcome the fundamental absence of life's most essential resource. The question is no longer if modern cities will face water crises, but how many and how soon. From the parched fields of modern India to the shrinking rivers of the American West, the global thirst is not merely a crisis of drinking water. It's an existential threat to the very foundation of human civilization: agriculture. The delicate balance that allows us to feed billions of people is unraveling under the relentless assault of changing rainfall patterns, prolonged droughts, and increasingly extreme weather events. Just as the collapse of ancient farming systems led to widespread famine and societal breakdown, today we face a precarious future where the world's breadbaskets are increasingly unreliable. Consider the vital crops that sustain us. Wheat, corn, rice, staples for billions, are highly sensitive to water availability and temperature fluctuations. In 2022, Europe experienced its worst drought in 500 years, devastating harvests of corn, soybeans, and sunflowers. France's corn harvest dropped by nearly 20%, while Italy's rice production, largely dependent on the River Po, faced catastrophic losses. The United States, a global agricultural superpower, saw its Midwestern corn and soybean crops scorched by record heat and drought, leading to billions in losses and driving up global food prices. These aren't just statistics. They're direct assaults on global food security, creating ripple effects that reach every dinner table. The challenges extend beyond drought. Extreme heat waves, a direct consequence of a warming planet, stress crops to their breaking point. Unpredictable deluges, shifting seasons, and new pest migrations further undermine agricultural stability. Farmers, already operating on thin margins, find their ancestral knowledge rendered obsolete by a climate that no longer behaves as it should. The vast, industrialized farming practices that feed our global population are paradoxically both highly efficient and incredibly fragile. They rely on predictable weather, stable water sources, and complex, interconnected supply chains, all of which are now under unprecedented strain. The consequences are dire: a reduction in crop yields, escalating food prices, and an increasing potential for widespread famine, particularly in regions already struggling with poverty and instability. The UN World Food Program warns that 345 million people are currently facing acute food insecurity, a figure that has more than doubled since 2020. This is not just a humanitarian crisis. It's a security crisis, a direct path to social unrest and political upheaval. The ancient lesson is clear. When the land fails to provide, societies begin to crumble. We are now, perhaps more than ever, witnessing this terrifying truth unfold on a global scale. As the earth parches and the waters retreat, the crisis extends beyond economics and sustenance, piercing the very heart of human identity, our sense of home. Just as the relentless grip of drought and resource scarcity propelled ancient populations into desperate migrations, today we witness a new, tragic exodus unfolding, the rise of the climate refugee. Millions are being uprooted, not by war or political persecution alone, but by a changing climate that renders their lands uninhabitable, their livelihoods impossible, and their futures bleak. In the Sahel, where desertification is rampant, entire villages are being abandoned. Communities whose families have tilled the same soil for generations are forced to pack what little they possess onto their backs and seek refuge in overcrowded urban centers or neighboring countries, often with hostile receptions. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, reports that climate-related disasters displace an average of 21.5 million people each year, a figure projected to surge as impacts intensify. This isn't just a temporary displacement. It's a permanent severance from ancestral lands, culture, and community. Consider the low-lying island nations in the Pacific like Tuvalu and Kiribati. Here, the threat isn't drought, but rising sea levels, eroding coastlines, and salinating freshwater sources, slowly drowning their homelands. Families face the agonizing decision of whether to wait until their islands are literally submerged or to migrate now, losing their unique identity and heritage in the process. The displacement is often internal before it becomes international. In Bangladesh, millions living in the low-lying delta region are already climate migrants, pushed inland from their coastal homes by intensifying cyclones, river erosion, and rising tides, straining infrastructure and resources in already dense cities like Dhaka. These journeys are fraught with peril. Climate refugees often become vulnerable to exploitation, human trafficking, and violence. They are stateless, often without legal recognition, caught in a limbo between international law and environmental reality. This modern migration, driven by the planet's rebellion, creates profound humanitarian crises, fueling social tensions and political instability in host regions. The parallels to ancient migrations, driven by similar environmental pressures, are chillingly clear. But unlike our ancestors who often had vast, uninhabited lands to move into, today's climate refugees face a world of borders, populations, and dwindling resources, a world where the very concept of refuge is being redefined by the relentless march of environmental degradation. This is the human face of climate change, a global displacement crisis that challenges our compassion, our policies, and our collective future. As water dwindles and populations surge, the ripple effects of environmental stress extend far beyond individual suffering and mass migration. They become potent catalysts for conflict. History is replete with examples of civilizations clashing over vital resources. Today, with a global population of 8 billion and finite water supplies, the stage is set for a new era of water wars, both within nations and across international borders. The struggle for this most basic necessity is rapidly transforming into a geopolitical flashpoint, turning life-giving rivers into lines of contention. Nowhere is this more evident than in the Nile Basin. For millennia, the Nile has been the lifeblood of Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, sustaining ancient empires and modern nations alike. But Ethiopia's ambitious Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD, nearing completion on the Blue Nile, has ignited furious tensions. Egypt, almost entirely dependent on the Nile for its water, views the dam as an existential threat, fearing catastrophic reductions in its already scarce water supply. Sudan, caught in the middle, juggles its own needs with regional stability. Negotiations have repeatedly stalled, and the rhetoric has escalated, with veiled threats of military action echoing across the region. This is a classic zero-sum game. What one nation gains in water security, another perceives as a direct loss, fueling deep-seated mistrust and potential conflict among nations with significant military capabilities. Similar fault lines exist across the globe. In the Middle East, the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, once the cradle of civilization, are now sources of intense dispute. Turkey's extensive dam projects upstream severely impact water flow to Syria and Iraq, exacerbating already fragile political situations and fueling insurgencies. The dwindling waters of the Jordan River continue to be a source of tension in one of the world's most volatile regions. Even in Southeast Asia, the Mekong River, a source of sustenance for 60 million people, sees its natural flow disrupted by a cascade of upstream dams in China, Laos, and Cambodia, threatening downstream fishing and agricultural communities and sparking quiet diplomatic battles. These are not hypothetical scenarios. They are unfolding realities. Access to clean water is becoming a tool of power, a weapon in proxy wars, and a primary driver of internal displacement and civil unrest. Governments that cannot provide water for their citizens face legitimate challenges to their authority. The World Bank estimates that water scarcity could displace an additional 140 million people by 2050, further intensifying competition and the potential for conflict. As the climate crisis deepens, the ancient truth resurfaces. Control over resources is control over destiny. And when that resource is water, the stakes could not be higher. The historical warnings are stark, the scientific evidence overwhelming, and the present day consequences undeniably visible. Yet, despite the escalating crisis, humanity finds itself in a peculiar and perilous state of policy paralysis and outright denial. Unlike ancient civilizations, which may not have fully comprehended the ecological forces undermining them, we possess unprecedented scientific understanding, global communication, and technological capacity. So why then do we falter? One significant hurdle is the insidious power of economic interests. The global economy, deeply entrenched in fossil fuels and unsustainable consumption, creates powerful lobbies that actively resist change. Trillions of dollars are invested in industries that profit from the status quo, and these industries exert immense pressure on political systems to delay, dilute, or outright block climate action. The narrative often shifts from denial of science to downplaying the urgency, framing climate action as an economic burden rather than an investment in our future. Reports from organizations like the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, consistently warn of rapidly narrowing windows for action, yet political cycles often prioritize short-term gains over long-term planetary health. Compounding this is political inaction, a collective failure of leadership on a global scale. International agreements like the Paris Accord, while significant, are often undermined by insufficient commitments, withdrawn participation, or slow implementation. Nations haggle over emissions targets, financial responsibilities, and equity, while the planet continues to warm. Domestically, partisan divides frequently paralyze legislative efforts, transforming scientific consensus into political debate. The immediacy of quarterly earnings or election cycles often overshadows the slow-burn catastrophe of climate change, making bold, transformative policies a difficult sell for politicians focused on the next election. And then there is denial. From fringe theories to well-funded disinformation campaigns, a deliberate effort to sow doubt and confusion about climate science persists. This denial, often amplified by social media, erodes public trust, fosters apathy, and justifies inaction. It creates a dangerous disconnect between the scientific community, which speaks with near-unanimous alarm, and parts of the public and political sphere who remain skeptical or disengaged. This isn't just a failure of policy. It's a failure of collective will, a tragic modern flaw that stands in stark contrast to the urgency of the ancient warnings. We are facing a crisis of unparalleled scale, armed with knowledge our ancestors could only dream of, yet our political systems often seem incapable of responding with the necessary speed and determination. The question isn't whether we know what to do, but whether we have the collective courage to do it before it's too late. The lessons from history are clear. Civilizations have risen and fallen with the changing climate. But there's a crucial, terrifying distinction between the environmental shifts that affected the ancients and the crisis we face today. While our predecessors were largely at the mercy of natural climate cycles, volcanic eruptions, solar variations, oceanic oscillations, modern humans are not merely reacting to a changing planet. We are driving it. Our human footprint has become the dominant geological force, accelerating our own fate at an unprecedented and alarming speed. The Industrial Revolution, beginning in the late 18th century, marked a turning point. For the first time, humanity began to extract and burn fossil fuels on an enormous scale: coal, oil, and natural gas, releasing vast quantities of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. This wasn't a natural fluctuation. It was a fundamental alteration of the planet's atmospheric chemistry. For millennia, atmospheric CO2 levels hovered around 280 parts per million. Today, that figure has surpassed 420 ppm, a level not seen on Earth for at least 800,000 years, and potentially millions of years. This rapid, human-induced increase is trapping more heat, warming oceans, melting glaciers, and fundamentally disrupting the delicate balance of Earth's climate system. Beyond fossil fuels, our unsustainable consumption patterns exacerbate the crisis. Deforestation, particularly in vital rainforests like the Amazon, removes crucial carbon sinks. Intensive agriculture, with its reliance on fertilizers and livestock, contributes significant methane and nitrous oxide emissions. The sheer scale of our consumption, from fast fashion to electronic waste, drives resource extraction and energy usage, feeding the very cycle that imperils us. Every flight taken, every product manufactured, every calorie consumed in the developed world leaves an indelible mark on the planet. The speed of this change is what truly sets our crisis apart. Geologists are now considering naming a new epoch, the Anthropocene, to acknowledge humanity's profound and lasting impact on Earth systems. While ancient climate shifts unfolded over centuries or millennia, giving societies some time to adapt or migrate, our current trajectory is measured in decades. Scientific models project that without drastic action, global temperatures could rise by several degrees Celsius within our lifetimes, leading to consequences that are almost unimaginable in their severity. Unlike the ancients, we cannot claim ignorance. The science is clear, the warnings are stark, and the fingerprints of our own actions are undeniable. We are not just passengers on a changing planet. We are the navigators, and we are currently steering straight towards a precipice of our own making. The weight of this unique responsibility, this accelerated trajectory, falls squarely on our shoulders. So, as we stand at this precipice, surveying the dust of ancient empires and the parched lands of our present, we are left with a question that echoes through time, gaining urgency with every passing day. Is history repeating itself? Are we, the architects of the modern world, destined to follow the path of civilizations that crumbled under the weight of environmental change, but on a scale and at a speed far beyond anything our ancestors could have imagined? The parallels are undeniable, the warnings stark, and the stakes immeasurable. We have witnessed the devastating effects of global thirst, threatening regions and megacities alike. We have seen how the precarious future of agriculture jeopardizes our very ability to feed ourselves. We have documented the unfolding tragedy of climate refugees, a new exodus driven by desperation. We have uncovered the dangerous potential for water wars, turning shared rivers into battlegrounds. And we have grappled with the profound modern challenge of policy paralysis and denial, hindering our capacity to act. The only difference, the most crucial one, is that unlike the ancients, we are the primary drivers of this accelerating crisis, our own human footprint irrevocably altering the planet. This is not a tale of inevitable doom. This is a moment of profound choice. The past offers not just warnings of collapse, but also blueprints for resilience. Ancient societies adapted, innovated, and sometimes even thrived in the face of environmental stress, even if their ultimate fate was sealed by forces beyond their control. We, however, possess control. We have the scientific knowledge, the technological ingenuity, and the global interconnectedness to chart a different course. We can choose to heed the warnings whispered by the dust of lost cities, to understand the intricate dance between humanity and its environment. But the clock is ticking. The window for meaningful action is rapidly closing. Will we learn from the ghosts of civilizations past, or will we become another cautionary tale, a future ruin for some distant descendant to ponder? The looming question hangs heavy in the air, carried by the rising heat and the vanishing waters. It asks us to look inwards, to look at our collective responsibility, and to decide, with urgency and courage, what kind of history we choose to write for ourselves. The answer will determine not just the fate of our cities, our farms, or our nations, but the very future of humanity on this fragile blue planet. The specter of collapse looms large in history, a stark warning echoing through the ages. Yet, the story of ancient civilizations is not merely one of decline. It is also a testament to human ingenuity, a chronicle of sophisticated strategies developed over millennia to not just survive, but thrive amidst relentless environmental challenges. Long before the advent of modern science, our ancestors cultivated a profound understanding of their ecosystems, embedding resilience into the very fabric of their societies. Consider the Inca, masters of the Andean highlands, who, even as their empire stretched across 2,500 miles, battled the harsh realities of high-altitude agriculture and unpredictable weather patterns. Their answer? The iconic Andins or agricultural terraces, such as those at Pisac or Moray, built from the 13th to 16th centuries. These magnificent staircases of stone didn't just maximize arable land on steep slopes. They were ingenious microclimates, absorbing solar radiation, reducing erosion, and expertly managing precious water runoff. Elaborate canal systems channeled meltwater from glaciers, some still functioning today, a testament to engineering prowess designed for enduring sustainability, not short-term gain. Thousands of miles away, in the dense jungles of Mesoamerica, the ancient Maya developed complex agroforestry systems, the milpa, that sustained their sprawling cities for centuries. Far from crude slash-and-burn, the milpa was a sophisticated rotation of corn, beans, and squash, complemented by diverse tree crops. This system, perfected over millennia, preserved soil fertility, enhanced biodiversity, and provided a stable food supply even in challenging climates. They cultivated an entire forest garden around their settlements, demonstrating a nuanced understanding of symbiotic relationships between plants, animals, and the very soil beneath their feet. Even in the arid American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans, or Anasazi, constructed elaborate, multi-story cliff dwellings in places like Mesa Verde, strategically leveraging microclimates for shelter and water collection. Their intricate irrigation networks, some dating back over 1,000 years, diverted seasonal rainfall to cultivate crops in a landscape that today often struggles to sustain even sparse vegetation. And in Australia, Aboriginal communities practiced firestick farming for tens of thousands of years, a controlled burning technique that regenerated ecosystems, promoted biodiversity, and prevented catastrophic bushfires, shaping the landscape in a dynamic partnership with nature. These are not mere historical footnotes. They are blueprints. These societies understood interdependence, the finite nature of resources, and the wisdom of working with the land, not against it. Their collective memory, encoded in practices passed down through generations, offers invaluable lessons for a world grappling with the reemergence of ancient ecological threats. As we confront increasingly erratic weather and diminishing resources, the quiet resilience of these ancient stewards calls to us, urging a reevaluation of our own relationship with the planet. Can we, too, rediscover the wisdom that allowed them to adapt, to innovate, and to endure? The ancient world, for all its wisdom, was ultimately bound by the limits of its technology and understanding. But humanity today stands at a different precipice, equipped with a singular advantage: unprecedented scientific knowledge and technological capability. The very ingenuity that brought us to this critical juncture also offers the most potent pathways to a sustainable future. We are not powerless spectators. We are architects of tomorrow, capable of crafting solutions that were once the stuff of science fiction. Take water, the lifeblood of all civilizations, ancient and modern. Where ancient societies struggled with inconsistent rainfall and rudimentary irrigation, we now possess transformative technologies. Advanced desalination plants, like the Sorek plant in Israel, can convert vast quantities of seawater into potable water, securing supplies for millions. Smart irrigation systems, utilizing sensors and AI, deliver water with pinpoint accuracy directly to plant roots, reducing waste by up to 70%. Breakthroughs in atmospheric water generation can literally pull drinkable water from the air in humid regions, offering decentralized solutions to communities far from traditional sources. The concept of closed-loop water recycling, once a dream, is now becoming a reality in sustainable urban planning projects like Masdar City in the UAE, where every drop is valued and reused. The energy that fuels our world is also undergoing a profound revolution. Gigantic solar power facilities, like the Ivampa Solar Electric Generating System in California, harness the sun's boundless energy, generating enough electricity to power hundreds of thousands of homes. Offshore wind farms, such as the Hornsea Project one off the UK coast, utilize colossal turbines to tap into powerful sea breezes, transforming once unreachable energy sources into clean, reliable power. Geothermal energy, drawing heat from the Earth's core, provides constant baseload power, and advancements in battery storage technology are finally making intermittent renewables a viable, round-the-clock solution. These innovations are not just reducing our carbon footprint. They're creating new economies and energy independence. Even agriculture, the foundation of ancient survival, is being reimagined. Vertical farms, stacking crops in climate-controlled environments, allow for year-round production with minimal land and water usage, often within urban centers. Precision agriculture uses drones, satellite imagery, and AI to optimize every aspect of farming, from seeding to harvesting, drastically reducing resource consumption. And perhaps most promising, regenerative agriculture practices are revitalizing depleted soils, enhancing biodiversity, and sequestering carbon directly from the atmosphere, marrying ancient principles with modern ecological science. Humanity's capacity for innovation is not just keeping pace with our challenges. It is accelerating, offering concrete tools to avert the fate of those who came before us. But these tools, however powerful, require something more profound, a collective will to wield them. The echoes of history are undeniable, the warning stark. From the dust of ancient cities, we hear the silent plea of civilizations that faltered when their relationship with nature broke. We've seen their ingenuity, and we've witnessed our own burgeoning capacity for innovation. But the most crucial lesson, perhaps, is that technology alone cannot save us. The future, unlike the past, is not a predetermined path etched in ancient ruins. It is a choice, a profound, collective decision we make every single day, with every action, every policy, and every commitment. The climate crisis is not merely an environmental challenge. It is a human one. It demands a collective response on a scale never before witnessed. It calls for individuals to reassess their consumption patterns, to advocate for change, and to embed sustainability in their daily lives. It requires communities to build local resilience, to share knowledge, and to champion initiatives that foster sustainable living and green infrastructure. Imagine cities designed for people, powered by renewables, fed by local farms, a vibrant mosaic of interconnected sustainable communities. But individual and community action, while vital, must be amplified and supported by decisive leadership. Governments, at every level, bear the immense responsibility of crafting and implementing policies that prioritize long-term ecological health over short-term economic gain. This means investing massively in renewable energy, creating robust frameworks for carbon sequestration, protecting and restoring vital ecosystems, and ensuring equitable transitions for all. International bodies must foster unprecedented cooperation, forging agreements that transcend national borders and recognize our shared planetary destiny. The Paris Agreement, signed by nearly 200 nations, marked a critical first step, but must be continuously strengthened, its ambitions elevated, and its commitments met with unwavering resolve. This is not a burden to be feared, but an opportunity to be seized. An opportunity to build a world founded on principles of respect for nature, justice, and intergenerational equity. A world where innovation serves life, where economies are circular and regenerative, and where the well-being of all living things is paramount. The journey will be arduous, fraught with challenges, and demand sacrifices. But the alternative, the silent, desolate landscape of a future unchosen, is unthinkable. We stand at a pivotal moment, poised between the dust of despair and the promise of renewal. The legacy of ancient civilizations reminds us of the fragility of even the mightiest empires when environmental harmony is lost. The marvels of modern science offer us the tools to forge a different path. Now it is up to us, all of us, to choose, to learn from the past, innovate for the present, and together, write a new chapter for humanity, one defined not by collapse, but by courageous adaptation, collective action, and an enduring commitment to life on Earth. The future is not set. It begins with us. Today, our journey through dust to despair has laid bare a profound, unsettling truth. The environmental forces that reshaped ancient civilizations were not mere footnotes in history. They were often the primary authors of collapse. From the sudden droughts that shattered agricultural empires to the slow creep of desertification that devoured once fertile lands, the past speaks to us with stark, undeniable warnings about the fragility of even the mightiest societies when confronted by a changing climate. The blueprints of destruction lie etched into the very landscapes we have explored. Today, these same environmental stresses are not localized threats, but planetary challenges, manifesting on a scale our ancient predecessors could never have imagined. Yet, unlike them, we stand a unique precipice. We are not ignorant to the mechanisms of climate change. We possess unparalleled scientific understanding, revolutionary technological capabilities, and an interconnected global community capable of profound collective action. We hold in our hands the data, the tools, and the understanding that countless civilizations before us lacked. Therefore, the echoes from the past aren't merely a prophecy of doom, but a powerful, urgent call to consciousness and action. The fate of civilizations past was often sealed by forces beyond their full comprehension or control. Ours, however, is still in our hands. The choice is clear: succumb to the despair of historical repetition, or harness our collective ingenuity and resolve to forge a sustainable path forward. Let the dust of ancient cities remind us not of inevitable collapse, but of the urgent, transformative power of human will. The future, one of hope, resilience, and coexistence with our planet, awaits our unwavering commitment today.